Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited about this episode today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is a quote just for this episode. The person who stays grounded and centered has the power in any given situation. Mark J. Silverman. Our guest today, um, new to the Culture Matters podcast, but already a quick friend, was introduced by somebody cared for deeply, who's a staple on the show by now. Dr. David Yerkes has been advising and coaching and leading in and around corporate America for decades. But about roughly a decade ago, they became the coach, the leader, the steward to great leaders in companies of all walks of life. They're an author of the Only Tens 2.0 book, which was actually re-edited. We'll talk about huge hit, over 75,000 copies sold. The author of a book that I've been reading, The Rising Leader Handbook, founder of the podcast, The Rising Leader. They've interviewed and done podcasts of close to 600, if not more, which puts them in a rank of their, a different rank of guests that we've had on the show, those that actually don't stop doing their podcast but keep going. And has sold over 90 million of various products and services throughout their corporate career as a high level account executive, if I'm saying that correctly. Um, and I could say more, but without further ado, Mark J. Silverman, thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. It's so funny because with the podcast, the average podcast ends after 13 episodes.
Really?
Yeah, and when I heard that, it's interesting because you don't understand your own commitment. You minimize what I minimize what I accomplish. I minimize what I create. So when I first had only tens and it sold 10,000 copies, 20,000 copies, I thought it was a failure because I compared it to certain other luminary books. It didn't do what Atomic Habits did and be number one for 2 years in a row, right? So I'm like, I'm a failure. And then I was reading a book about publishing, and they said, if a book sells more than 1,000 copies, it's a huge hit. And I was like, wait, I've sold about
Oh,
75,000 copies of this book. It must be a hit. And then with the podcast, at first I was doing three a week. I fell in love with podcasting. I fell in love with talking to people. And next thing I know, I had 100, 200, 300 episodes, right? And I found out that people quit pretty quickly. And I learned that just sticking to it, just you know, honing your craft, just keeping your commitment to yourself will create a body of work, will create things that you didn't think were possible.
why did you start it?
Really? You want to know the real reason I started it?
Heck yeah.
Okay, so I was sitting on my meditation cushion and I was meditating and I was thinking about writing a book called Mastering Midlife. That was what I was thinking about at that time. It was what I was coaching around a lot, a lot of 40, 50-year-old men going through it. And I was sitting on the cushion and the voice said, "Start a podcast." And I was like,
Wow.
starting a podcast? I sound like a male Fran Drescher. I cannot with this voice start a podcast. Next day I'm meditating, start a podcast. Like I am not starting a podcast. Next day, start a podcast. I'm like, it's so interesting. So then I'm coaching a client of mine. And I said, I was thinking about writing this book, but I keep getting the nudge to start a podcast. He goes, "Funny, Mark. I just bought a podcasting company."
Holy cow.
He goes, "I will hook you up with a producer, with everything." Next thing I know, I have 15 episodes to start a podcast. And I have kept that commitment every week for 4 years now. And
There are listeners that most likely have thought about starting a podcast. What are some of the don'ts that you'd give to the listeners?
don'ts. Oh, um, don't speak on anything that you're not passionate about. Don't start a podcast because you think someone else will think it's interesting. If you're not interested in the subject matter, like if you aren't the most excited person listening to your own podcast, you're on the wrong podcast. You're doing the wrong podcast.
Why?
One, it's grueling. It's grueling to keep up the momentum. Sift through the guests. It's hard to do something week in and week out if you're not completely enamored. So for me, starting the Mastering Midlife podcast, that was the most fascinating, most interesting thing at the time for me because I was watching people implode from the stresses of that time of life. And I had a solution for it, and I went through it and I had a solution for it, and I wanted other people to have that solution. So every guest I spoke to, I was fascinated with. It was just riveting to me to talk to each person. Then my next podcast, I did actually start my following podcast more to align with my business and more to be a business thing. And I got really bored. So that was the Mastering Overwhelm
Wow.
podcast. And I did an entire year of Mastering Overwhelm. I rebranded everything to Mastering Overwhelm. And it was from my Only Tens book. And it was the workshops I was doing. And it was so successful. But I was bored to tears. I didn't care. I didn't care about productivity. I didn't like, I care about it because it's part of my life, but that wasn't my passion. And then when the rising leader came up, again, everything I do comes from intuition. Everything comes from an internal fire. When
Hmm.
the rising leaders came up to write and to lean into, uh, that was a passion of mine, right? I was back into talking to people who I couldn't wait to talk to, talking to people who I couldn't get enough of. So that my own content was fascinating to me.
What is a rising leader to you?
Anybody who is moving through the ranks, going from being a subject matter expert or someone who outperforms everybody else to someone who now has to let go of that safety to become someone who creates success through others.
Hmm. So do you find yourself working with the management teams a lot?
I actually work with the executive teams. I don't work much with management teams. I do workshops for management teams, but I work mostly in the executive suite where people have just had a meteoric rise, where they've risen so quickly because they're so talented, so brilliant. They've risen through the organization so fast that they find themselves on the executive team with a C in front of their title, and they haven't gotten the skills to either get along on a team of peers, to be a trusted advisor to the CEO, to learn how to lead others. So that for me, that's where my career blazed a trail. For those people who have just not had the time to mature and ripen on the vine as they moved up through the organization.
What are some of their characteristics that almost invert in value in that position?
They become a pain in the ass to the CEO because they're so smart, they're so driven. They don't know how to not speak their mind, which is valuable on the leadership team, right? But it's not valuable when you don't know when you're a shotgun and not a rifle. In other words, when you don't pick a hill to die on, pick subjects that are important so that you're listened to. Again, and the other thing is, not learning how to play well with others. When you're on a leadership team of other powerful leaders, of other people with ambition, of other people with ideas who want resources and want to be heard, how do you play well on that team? How do you go from tennis to basketball? And then the other piece is, letting go of that safety of knowing everything that's going on in their organization, knowing everybody's job better than they do. At some point, the people on your team have to be better at their jobs than you ever were at your job, and that's a tough one. And then the last piece is just the inner self leadership. Most people I work with are so driven that they forget to take care of their relationships. Forget to take care of their mental health and their physical well-being, and think it's going to be there for them when they're in their 40s and 50s. And
Mm.
I'm the ghost of Christmas future. I'm 62 years old. Like, I can tell you exactly what your trajectory is going to lead you to. And if we can do some things now, we can make sure that you are doing 45-year-old, 50-year-old you a solid.
Is the demand growing over the years for that external coach when it comes to the C-suite? Because you've been in this for some time. Do you see an
I,
uptick in
I
it, or
yeah, I've seen an acceptance. I was just on a mastermind where a CEO was speaking, and he said he had four coaches. And he said, what I learned is the more successful I am, the more support I need. So I have a financial advisor, I have a personal trainer coach, I have a spiritual coach, and I have a business coach. So it's becoming more accepted. I've had a full practice and a waiting list now for 4 years, 5 years, about 4 years, where
Hmm.
the first 5, 6 years of my practice, I was pretty successful quickly, but I didn't have that really sustainable, predictable, like where I felt safe until year, maybe six. And the last 4 years, it's just people are hungry to get better. The other thing that's changed in the workplace, I believe, is you used to be able to motivate. So I work with people who often have what we call greedy jobs. They pay a lot and they ask a lot.
Hmm.
So the sweatshop kind of, like, you put in your 70, 80 hours a week, and the reward at the end is huge, and that takes a toll on people. People used to be willing to do that. You used to be able to use a hammer and treat people like nails, right? You used to
As
be
I'm drinking my Celsius, I'm just thinking like,
oh, oh God, don't my that gets my ADD. I thought Celsius was just flavored club soda. I slammed three of them at a conference once.
wow.
I didn't sleep all night. That shit's not.
We'll do a podcast marathon next time, huh?
Yeah. But anyway, back to the
Sorry.
workplace. The um the job market here in the US is so good that people are like, you know what? I'd rather work in Miami from my loft
Yeah.
than work in this. I'd rather work for myself. So a lot of these really driven people are finding ways to work for themselves, or the competition for them is so high that you can no longer lead that way. You now do need to lead in a fashion where you have to be vulnerable, you have to have heart, you have to have interest, you have to inspire your people. People aren't afraid to lose their job, they're not afraid to walk away from a job. My both my sons have very different values from what I grew up with. I was desperate to be successful. I was, and part of my story is I was homeless when I was younger, living in my truck. So when I got an opportunity to be successful, I was hungry for that. My sons aren't hungry for that. They're more hungry for life, which is so much more balanced, so much more healthy. So their jobs are not going to get that kind of work out of them. And I'm watching my leaders
Hmm.
deal with that. Is like, why aren't my folks as motivated as I was? And it's because they have a different culture. They have a different motivation. Now you have to inspire them in a different way. You have to accommodate them in a different way. They're not soft. They're actually healthier and smarter. We just have to balance the two.
Okay, do you think there's a relationship between the people repressing less and then the onus being on their authorities to have to listen in compensation for that? That's what I'm trying to follow your trend.
Can you go, can you explain that question a little bit more?
Yeah, like if you were self-motivated, so maybe you or me or someone would push some of the head trash from the boss to the side,
Mhm.
and we would just be self-motivated.
I was fear motivated.
So let's say we're fear motivated, right, in a different generation,
Mhm.
but now this generation coming up is not motivated that way. So there's more responsibility that's going to their leadership to have to.
100%.
That's kind of where I'm trying to follow your.
Yeah.
There's something here I want to unpack. It's
So
good.
yes, there was a culture of a trajectory. You get a job, you work 40, you work 40 years, you get a 401k, you put your kids through college. There was a traditional trajectory, and there was a cultural uh, pressure to perform that way. I don't think people today feel that, and COVID did a bunch to unravel all that. I'm sure you've done 75 podcasts on how COVID just changed the nature of work. But Yeah, but I think also people are becoming healthier. They watched people burn out. They watched their parents' marriages just get destroyed. They watched their parents' health deteriorate. I think my kids are a little more healthy because of the choices I made, the change and shift I made. Uh, so I think they're seeing and wanting something different and trying to figure out a way to navigate differently than we did.
What do you think it was about only tens that made it so successful?
That is not anomaly that I cannot figure out. The interesting thing was I wrote it for me. I thought I would sell one copy. I wrote it for people with ADHD, right? I became an entrepreneur and I could not get a thing done. I could not figure out like I narrowed things down. I did all the things that every program told me to do. I bought a Franklin planner. I did getting things done twice. I couldn't keep any of the systems together because of the ADD. And so I wrote it for me and for people with ADD. What happened was people were giving it to CEOs who were overwhelmed. People who I did not see myself in were reading the book and saying, holy shit, this changes everything. And basically, what Only 10 says is we only do what we want to do, only always. We never do what we don't want to do, only always. And we lie to ourselves about everything. And I think people saw
I love
themselves
that.
and people saw themselves in that. It was a very honest and raw book. The first version of it was much thinner, and it was basically, hey, look, I discovered this thing for myself. Isn't that interesting? And people loved it. And then before I was going to write my next book, my publisher was like, you've been coaching and living Only Tens for 5 years. You're a different person. Can you rewrite it from this perspective so that it's a more robust book? So that's why it's 2.0, because there's client stories, there's things I've learned from rereading and re-going through Only Tens, so that it made it a much more robust book. Then she let me write my next book.
You think there was a relationship between self-awareness and actually getting things done?
That was the only self-awareness. It was my coach at the time when I called him and said, now that I said, never underestimate the value of an asshole sales manager. The fact that I wanted to please an asshole sales manager, the fact that my name was on a leaderboard and I cared where my name was on that leaderboard was motivating to me, those external motivations. When I became an entrepreneur, when I became a coach, the only motivation was me. I had money in the bank. I had, I was busy all day long doing things I loved. I wasn't thinking of it as a business. And I said to my coach, I can't seem to get myself to focus and get things done. And he said, Mark, it's not true. He says, you ran the Marine Corps Marathon. I said, yeah. He says, so you did that. He said, you set a goal one year to make $1 million. You did that.
Wow.
And he pointed out a few things that I did that were accomplishments. He says, so I don't think it's true that you can't get things done. He says, I think it's true that you don't do what you don't want to do. And I was like, shit, that was the light bulb moment. I was like, oh, I procrastinated on things that I just don't feel like doing. Or I procrastinate on things that the fear or again, for me, the ADD, the fog of like where it shows up here is my assistant and I have a system for social media. I make videos, I put them in this folder. She writes out the things, I check them and all that stuff. But if things are in the wrong place, or if I lose the link to one of those things, my ADD, as intelligent and as competent as I am, I'm like, I got to go scroll Instagram. I have to go make some food. I have to go do anything else than deal with what that does to the way my brain works. So the avoiding the overwhelm and the fog of ADD is more important than getting something done. Now, when I call a friend and say, hey, I'm about to do my taxes, would you mind opening up Zoom and staying on Zoom while I open up all the portals that I'm supposed to, open up for my CPA to do all the things I need to do? And miraculously, I'm able to get through that fog,
Huh.
get it done in almost no time because I have help. So that means it's a 10, right? I'm able to work through the resistance. So for me, and the conversations I've had with everybody is, if you're having trouble getting things done, what is it that you are avoiding? What is it that you don't want? And getting real about that.
Hmm. So NetApp, was that the first job?
Uh, Network Appliance was the first uh, wildly successful job. I had a few jobs before that. I was away, I was homeless, and then I waited on tables for a long time. And then when I finally took a sales job, and I failed miserably at first, but I took the sales job. And when I realized that my ability to connect with people would help me sell, I became ridiculously successful. I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I don't like to bother people. I am a naturally fearful person. And my superpower is connecting. It was what was kept me safe as a kid. It's what I know how to do. So when I started connecting with people as a sales guy, that's when I started. I was making $26,000 a year. Then I doubled my income to 50,000. Then I doubled it again to 100,000. Like from a guy who was homeless, until he was 30 years old, never made more than $26,000 a year. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh my god, I am something. Then I made $200,000 a year. Then I made $400,000 a year. And for me, that was like, who am I? Right, like this homeless, like how does one go from that to this, and then I made the $1 million that one year. That was crazy. But then there was some internal work that went with that, but that was
Hmm.
the trajectory of my career.
Do you remember that epiphany, like where you were,
The epiphany of,
that you could connect with people?
yeah, I was selling computer training. I took this job, and I so bad, I had to make 60 cold calls a day. And again, um I'm shy. I don't like to bother people, and so I set myself up to uh, I got a dollar. I put $1 in a jar towards a Toyota for no Ford Explorer. I wanted an Eddie Bauer Ford Explorer at that time. So every day that I made my 60 calls, I put $1 in the jar for that. Every
Wow.
day I didn't make my 60 calls, I wasn't allowed to listen to the radio on the way home. And
Wow.
did not work. None of that worked. What worked was, in order to sell computer training, we gave away a class so that the people would come in, and then we could talk to them. And when the light bulb went on at about month five, I struggled for months. And month five, I was like, I can give away a class. Like, I can call people and say, hey, I got something for you. It didn't even dawn on me. And then when I started giving away classes, and I started getting people to come in for the class, and then I could meet them after the class, I went from almost being fired to the number one sales guy in no time. And that was an epiphany for me.
Wow.
My next sales job, I was walking in one of those tech conferences, and this was before digital cameras were a thing. uh, Someone was selling a what was called a smart board. It was a whiteboard where you could project onto it, and then you could use your finger to move things and draw things, and do things like that. And then the first digital camera, and I thought those were the coolest things I had ever seen in my entire life. And so I talked to the company who was selling it, and they gave me a job. And I went from computer training to selling these gadgets. And because I thought they were the coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life, I became a great sales guy and doubled my
Wow.
income again. And then I remember when I made my first $1.5 million sale with this camera, with the first digital camera to the Marine Corps. That was, I made the biggest sale in the company's history, and that's when I knew, oh, okay, I got something.
What was the shift from high producing sales to executive coaching? And what would be your advice to someone listening that wants to go in that trajectory, that feels connected to your story? They're where you were
So
once.
I did not know what coaching was. In 2009, uh, at the height of my career, I was married, I had two kids. All of the internal stuff that made me a homeless guy, that made me a drunk, that made me the started to catch up with me. right? So the premise of mastering midlife was the drives and motivations that make you successful in your 20s and 30s turn on you in your 40s and 50s if you don't work them out. If you don't you deal with those pathologies, those traumas, they're going to turn on you, and your marriage is going to break up. Your health, something's going to happen. And it
Mm.
happened to me. All of a sudden, my marriage started falling apart. My health started falling apart. I couldn't sell anything. Everything, my entire being was just coming apart at the seams. I couldn't hold this facade of successful rich guy together anymore. And it just fell apart. When my career went in the toilet, when my marriage fell apart, and I found myself in a one bedroom apartment around the corner from my wife and kids, and my health was just I lost a whole bunch of weight, and I just horrible. When that happened, uh, that's when my shift to the next chapter of my life happened. I thought I was going to die. I was pretty sure I was going to die because there was like everything, like my self was, I was just eating myself alive, and I was stone cold sober. I couldn't understand why stone cold sober this was happening. So that was when I ran the Marine Corps Marathon. I decided I was going to leave $1 million for my wife and kids. I was going to run the Marine Corps Marathon. I was going to give $60,000 to charity that year, and then die. But
Wow.
show my kid, that I really thought I was going to die. So I said, I'll show. I was depressed and suicidal. I wanted to die, but I didn't. So I wanted to leave a legacy for my kids that I could do something when everything fell apart. So I trained for the marathon. I couldn't run a mile. Called this guy who I had heard on a radio station that said, he could train anybody to run. So I called him, and this was before the internet, before Zoom and all that stuff. So we had our phone calls, and he trained me to run the marathon. Uh, I got a new sales job with a great engineer. God was just so kind to me to give me the exact right engineer, the exact right product, the exact right team to be part of. Uh, and that year, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon an hour faster than even my coach thought I could. I made the $1 million. I gave the $60,000 to charity. I remember writing those checks, and I was healthier than I ever been. My career was on fire, and I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." And even my ex-wife said she said, "I was so worried about you because you were so depressed and suicidal." She said, "But what I've been reading," she said, "you did everything that I could have thought you should do to get yourself out of it." And I said, "Yeah, I've been listening to all these self-help books. I've been listening to every spiritual book, every self-help book,
Mm.
every positive psychology book. I've been meditating, I've been journaling, I've been doing all these things to build a new Mark Silverman back." So when I went back to work and and was in the tech industry, I came back a different person. I came back, and I was like an ex-smoker, and I was watching all of my contemporaries. I was watching their marriages fail. I was watching the addictions. I was watching the price we paid to be in the 1% that we were all okay with. And I was like, I am not okay with this. And I
Wow.
started writing newsletters to my in my company, and like I would get admonished, like, Silverman, stop sending these newsletters out. Like, nobody wants to hear your shit. It's like, but you got to understand, like, there's a new way to do this. There's a new way of life. And then
Wow.
I was reading a book, and I was going to go on my first retreat. I was going to go on a retreat, and this author, Alan Cohen, who I was going to go on his retreat in Hawaii, he calls me, and like my favorite authors just calls me out of the blue. He goes, "Mark, this is Alan Cohen." He goes, "I don't think you should go to this program." He says, "I think you should join my coaching program and learn how to be a coach." I'm like, "What's coaching?" And he tells me what coaching is. I said, "Yeah, no, I'm a salesman." He goes, "Yeah, it'll make you a better salesman and make you a better father." But he says, "And Spirit told me that you should do this, and I have to follow Spirit. So if you want to do this, I will give you all your money back if you don't like it, and you can go to any one of my programs. You can do whatever you want, but just do this." So I went and told my ex-wife this, and she said, "I have been telling you for years that people need to learn what you know. We thought it was HR. We didn't know what job it was, but companies and executives and businesses need to get what
Mm.
you know." And this was my ex-wife who depended on me. She stayed home with the kids. Even when we were divorced, I kept her home with the kids until they graduated high school. And she said, "I think you should do this." And I was really good at it. I did the practice sessions, and coaching was just, it was a fish in water. I found who I was, what I was born to do. Everything else I did. I worked really hard to fit a round peg in a square hole. This was this was my being is a coach.
Wow.
And again, what they don't tell you is when you become a coach, you're an entrepreneur. So when I left my $500,000 a year job to become a coach, I did not realize that now I need to go build a business.
What's the distinction?
The distinction is the phone doesn't ring. like once you're not part of these startups that like I was in some sexy companies. Once you're not part of these companies, nobody really gives a shit about you. I've talked to a bunch of C-suite executives who have retired and gone into consulting, and they're like, oh my god, I thought I was so popular, my phone doesn't ring anymore. Like, no, nobody cares. And so now you have to go into business building mode. So I hired a
What
coach.
problems are solved by having, because we have entrepreneurs listening to this, those that they can't only say no, they can say yes. What problems does coaching solve for their companies?
Ooh, the best definition of coaching I've ever heard was coaching helps you're going to go from point A to point B. Whether it's a business problem, whether it's a goal, whether it's a training thing, whether it's a spiritual thing, you want to go from point A to point B. The right coach helps you get from point A to point B faster
Hmm.
with less friction. They help you find out what's in the way of you getting from point A to point B. Again, whether it's a spiritual goal, whether it's a training goal, whether it's a business goal, they help you short circuit that. Some of us who have been in the business, I would say I'm half coach, half consultant. Because I've traversed the corporate world, right? I understand the way leadership teams work, so I can advise as well as coach and draw out. If you read the book, you'll see
Hmm.
a lot of the conversations I have in the book with my clients are pretty pointed. I'm going to go in and say this. No, don't say that.
Yeah, I really
That's
recommend the
not
book, The
coaching.
Rising Leader Handbook,
Yes.
to our audience. Turning high achievers into effective leaders. Very practical and great book. I'm enjoying actually reading out. I don't have to lie.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I got to read the book before the podcast, right?
Right.
So even if it's not my cup of tea, but it's a really great book, and practical for our listeners. Um, Characteristics. What were some of the characteristics that those, like you said, your ex-wife noticed about you that made you a great coach? For those that might not, that may be listening, that have yet to discover that they actually have those qualities and they're not sure how to articulate them or accept them. What are some of those characteristics that make a great coach?
Um, One is wanting to see other people succeed more than I want to see myself succeed. Really, that's going into sales management, that's going into leadership in general anyway. Really being dedicated to seeing someone else shine and really caring about that person. For me, I think it's having a perspective. Most great coaches have gone through something. They were somewhere, something happened, something, they worked through some challenge and now have something to share about working through that challenge. And so most you pick a coach who looks like they've walked the walk that you need to walk and can help you go through that. Now, I coach people who do things that I coach people in private investment. I know nothing about private investment, right? But I know who they have to be in order to be successful in that kind of an organization, so I can walk them through that. So having a perspective, having been homeless, becoming a millionaire, losing it all, and building myself back is invaluable experience that I can share and a perspective I can come from that is helpful to people. Having been in the corporate world, having been a success myself, often I'll flash, like I wear a solid gold watch and Hugo Boss suits. I'll flash my watch at some really successful executive who's kind of looking me up and down and go, "Look, I wear a $35,000 fucking gold watch. I don't give a shit about your money or your position. This is what you're dealing with," right?
Mm.
That helps in that moment. I'm going to talk to an executive this afternoon who is a bull in a china closet, right? Can't Nobody can get through to him, and we're going to have a conversation. And he's been warned. I'm not nice. Like, I will say what needs to be said, whether
How
you're going to be my
important
client or not, right?
how important is it honesty in that relationship?
It's the only if you cannot risk the client signing with you, if you cannot risk the client firing you, you can't be a coach.
Why? Why?
If you can't say what needs to be said, if you can't point them to what needs to be seen for them to get where they want to go, you cannot coach them, because you have to be that light. You have to be that searchlight for them to look. My coach is a young woman who's half my age, half my experience, but she said something to me, and she was able to have me see a blind spot that no other world fucking famous coach in the world has been able to get me to look at, because I'm so good at this. I've read every book. I have been on every workshop. I have deeply meditated, right? I'm a spiritual guy. So it's very hard to get through to me. She saw it. She was a searchlight. She said it to me. My first thought was, bitch, right? Like, it wasn't thank you, I love you. It was, oh my God, I need to fire her immediately. Right? And it was the breakthrough that nobody has ever been able to help me get through, because I haven't been willing to look at it. That kind of candor, that kind of honesty, that kind of willingness to go out on a limb, and have someone as powerful as me push back is invaluable. So if I can be that pushback for someone else who's way more successful than I could ever dream of being, who has created things in the world. If I could be that person who I'm the brick wall they run into, that they can't not look at the thing they need to look at, that's
Hmm.
invaluable.
Wow. Someone that's saying to themselves, "Yeah, but I just don't have the money."
For coaching,
Yeah.
yeah, great. I put on my website. I promote a bunch of programs that are self coaching. I just promoted in my newsletter today, Impact Theory, Tom Bilyeu, for $195. He's got this program that tells you everything that's in I even say in my newsletter, everything that's in Only Tens, everything that's in the Rising Leader program. It's all in his freaking program. I don't actually agree with everything in his program, but for $195, there's a ton of shit there, right? You can go and listen to the Michael Singer podcast for absolutely free. You go through 3 seasons of the Michael Singer podcast, you will come out the other side a different person, right? All that stuff that I did when I wasn't paying coaches, when I was going through the thing, when I was running for the marathon, like, except for the coach for the running, I wasn't paying coaches. I was listening to all the free stuff on the internet. Not having the money is no excuse. And I have spent over $500,000 on my own coaching. I have spent the equivalent of my children's college tuition on
Wow.
one coach for one thing, because I know what it'll do for me. Right. So again, that investment, do you need the new car, or do you need to get out of your own way so that you can buy 5 new cars? Like, the value of coaching, if it's a good coach, is exponential.
Hmm. What about audiobooks?
I listen to audiobooks all day, every day. That's my preferred way of reading. So I used to read a ton of books. Now I listen to the audiobooks, because my dogs demand to be walked really far distances. Uh, and then if I like the book, I go and buy the hard copy so that I can underline it and do all go back to the pieces. But yeah, books are invaluable. There's masterminds to join. There's group programs to join. You Price shouldn't be a thing.
How can someone get the most out of a mastermind in your view?
Participate, 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 participate. Like, stick your hand up. Be too much. be the person who takes up too much space. Let the person who's leading the mastermind tell you, hey, look, give someone else, like, you be hungry when you go into a mastermind, and then equally be hungry, but equally be willing to give to the other people in the mastermind.
Mm.
Right? Give. But don't be afraid to take your time.
You mentioned earlier you believe that you're an introvert.
Oh, I'm very much an introvert. It's funny. My husband is like, how can you possibly be an introvert when you're on stages all the time? You have a microphone and camera in your face all the time. You're
Oh.
like, yeah, it's not. It drains the fuck out of me to be in groups of people. It drain. I like being on a stage. I like leading a workshop. I do not like going to the reception beforehand. I'm really bad in groups of people. It's very very hard for me. I do it. I am a situational extrovert. I'm very charming and can be outgoing and interesting to people. And I have to run home, get in my pajamas, and yeah.
Oh, for the introvert listening, what are some things you've developed over the years to function in those groups? Because you have to do it. You got to get it done. Are
So
there
for networking,
rituals and things?
yeah.
You
Well, for
spin around
networking,
3 times?
well, the breathing before I walk into a room has been a big game changer. Breathing changes my state. So, and it's just taking a couple deep breaths. It lowers my voice. It has me speak slower, and it has me given opportunity to not think about me and be interested in other people. So I come with a and curiosity about other people. The other thing I do when I go to a networking meeting is I give myself permission. If I make three deep connections, if I have three solid conversations with three good people, I can leave. So
Wow, I love that.
every time I go to a networking meeting, if I sat down and like had a good conversation over here, I had a really good conversation over here, I had a really good conversation over here, I can check myself. It's like, do you need to leave? Because you mission accomplished. And that's been really effective for me.
What about these podcasts? Being a guest on podcast, how is that something that? What's your advice to someone that's avoiding that deeply, like I do, for example?
Avoiding being guests on a podcast.
Yeah, I just yeah,
Why do you avoid being a guest on a podcast?
I feel that people aren't following my train of thought, or I'm just talking to myself the whole time. I'm not understood. You know, I talk. Yeah, I'm rambling.
Right. So you believe your self talk.
100%.
Right. So first off, don't listen to yourself. Like, do not listen to your podcasts. Do not rewatch your videos. Because like, so I was actually going through your Instagram because I do preparation before I go on someone else's podcast so that I know who they are, what they care about.
The
And
real coach.
I was taken with your Instagram because what I loved about your Instagram was that you process real time while you're speaking. You bring up a subject, and then all of a sudden you'll go off for a second, and you'll say, "This is what I really mean to say," and I loved it. That's your communication style. It's so real that I felt the patience to let you have you speak your mind. I found it refreshing because I have people on my podcast who are like this, and they're spewing their shit, and they've done on 100 podcasts, and they know what they're talking about. And I'm like, you know what? I need you to
Yeah,
slow
yeah.
down. And I'll say that to guests on my podcast. I like, can you take a deep breath for a sec? I really want to unpack what you just said because that was really important. Because so knowing your unique style, that you have something to say, that you have something to give, like you're going to, I'm on this podcast to serve. I am not on this podcast to be famous. I'm not on I like if Steve Chandler, one of my first coaches, once when he was talking about to coaches, he said, if you're worried about yourself in a coaching conversation, your attention's in the wrong place. It should
Mm.
be over there in the chair with the other person. So when you go on a podcast, it can't be about how I sound, how I look, and I'm vain as fuck, right? I shine my teeth, I put my shit together. I'm here in a studio that I built for myself, right? So I like to look good. but I'm here. I get myself in a, I'm here for that listener. I'm listening for whoever's listening for that one thing. If I can say something raw and honest and helpful, then that's why I'm here.
Mm.
Like if I come here to try and sound as smart as Simon Sinek, I'm gonna die, right? Because I'm not as articulate as Simon Sinek, right? I'm not Adam Grant. I cannot spew off all this
Another
stuff,
good one.
right? There's such brilliant people. I'm just a dude who has almost no tools and has become really successful and has garnered the tools as I've come along. So the people who are going to listen to me, the people who listen to David Goggins or Huberman, want nothing to do with me. The people who are like, God, I know I could step up and be a leader. I know I like, I'm scared, but I can do, like, I got you, right?
Mm.
I got you. So that's how I get it myself on podcasts. I have something I care about. I want people to stop killing themselves for success. I want people to stop destroying their families. I want people to stop ruining their health for success. I want people to change the world through business and leadership while transforming themselves through leadership. So I will put a microphone in my face every day, all day. I will write books. I will show up for this because I'm tired of people killing themselves for a false sense of success.
Mm. You're working on a book now.
No, I finished that book, the Rising Leader book. I am now in the lull of oh shit, that was a lot of work. I'm now like I contract after I have a major expansion. I often kind of go introvert and kind of go yeah, not really feeling a whole heck of a lot except my dogs and my fish and I think I want to draw a little more, but I do I have a team that keeps me on
Mm.
podcasts and on stages and doing those things so that I don't fall to the level of my motivation. I rise to the level of my commitments.
What was it like writing the first book versus the second?
The first book was a happy accident. I had severe ADD. I was having a walk with a friend, and I said I had this idea for this silly book about getting things done about with ADD called Only Tens, and because it was out of that conversation with my coach, but I have no idea how to write a book. And he goes, I just took a job with a book coaching company. I'm going to introduce you to my boss. Angela Loria, and we have a cohort of people who are going to write a book starting soon. You should join that cohort. I was like, okay. So I had a conversation with Angela and I said, this is my topic. She goes, great topic. You're in.
Wow.
Gave them my money. And it was writing a book from idea to publication in 90 days, which was perfect for my ADD. They gave me a coach to plug things in, and the editor, the developmental editor, took all my ADD ideas and were able to put them in an order that made sense. And so from idea to book, it was 90 days. And then it sold 1,500 copies the first day.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Corporate culture. How do you view culture in the workplace? The importance, the unimportance, the value of even the conversation around it. What's work? Like yeah, let's go in that direction.
I think nothing happens in an organization w- without culture. So I think everything comes out of the norms and the attitudes of the leadership. And you cannot get away with it. You cannot state what the culture is, live something different, incongruent, and expect it to permeate through the organization. I was really lucky when I got into corporate and when I got into tech startups. I got into some of the best tech startups with the best leadership teams I still have ever seen. And I have these people on my podcast and talk to them all.
Wow.
They're in the book because I just cannot believe the culture that they built. So
Wow.
for my leaders, it's, are you walking your talk? Are you keeping your word? Like let's start with the small things. Do you say what you're going to do and do what you say you're going to do? Do you keep your word? Right? That's like the first thing. If you keep your word, you can hold the people in your organization accountable. If you do not keep your word, you can't keep them accountable. Right? You have to be trustworthy in order to foster trust with other people.
Why is that difficult?
There's a lot of justification. I'm a person who doesn't keep his word to himself. Right? That's my normal with the ADD, with the reason I write books the way I write them is because I need to read them, right? I need to help
Hmm.
keep myself accountable. I am not a naturally disciplined, honest person. I was an alcoholic, a drug addict, a sex addict, and I was homeless, right? That's the soil I grew out of.
Oh.
So I built this person that I am. So I surround myself with people who hold me accountable. I speak about this stuff all the time. So I'm constantly reminding myself. I think people's defaults, people are so stressed these days,
Hmm.
right? So when you're stressed, you're in fight or flight. When you're stressed, you're not at your best. You're in a fear-based mode. Most people are walking around their businesses in some semblance of a fear-based mode. When you're in a fear-based mode, you're going to do what's expedient, what's going to stop the pain, what's the shortest distance between 2 points, whether it's the right way. So you're going to screw up on your integrity. I find people have a real hard time keeping their word to themselves. I was working with one CEO where his sales team was just not staying accountable. And he didn't understand it. He would go in and he would be like, "Why aren't you being accountable?" I'm like, "Yeah. How many times did you say you were going to go to the gym last week?" He said, "I said I was going to go 4 times." I said, "How many times did you go to the gym last week?" He said, "I went once and saw my trainer." I said, "Great. You didn't keep your word to yourself. You keep your word to yourself about small things like going to the gym, going to bed at a certain time, and that kind of thing. You watch the accountability rise on your sales team. You watch just by you keeping your word, right? In your 360, I found out that you are 360 is an interview process I do with all the people in the organization about that particular leader. I find out that you're 5 or 10 minutes late to every meeting. It's like, yeah, it's because I'm so excited. I'm either talking to a client, customer, or I'm just and I go over like, right, you're the CEO. Nobody's going to say anything. They're going to wait for you, but you're not fostering trust. You're not keeping your word. Right? So those types of things, if it starts with you. How are you showing up? Right? Are you building the culture that you want to
Hmm.
be part of?
Hmm.
Because it's always a reflection of the leadership team. Culture is always a reflection of the leadership team.
Are there any exceptions?
No, yeah, it just can't be. It comes from how the leadership team conducts themselves. They can state whatever they want. How they conduct themselves is how the rest of the team is going to be. Now,
Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
seen companies with horrible cultures have meteoric success,
Yeah, yeah, me too.
but it's not sustainable. I watch them crumble. Some companies just have products and services that are just. I will say Amazon is one of those places where uh, horrible culture. I think it's a maniacal culture on results, right? So but there's so much unhealthy about it from what I know, uh, that but their product, like, so I don't like what Amazon has done to parts of the economy. I don't like what Amazon has done to so many pieces of the industry. They destroy the publishing industry. Like, there's so much stuff I don't like about Amazon, but I use it every single day of my life. I compromise my values every day for that convenience. Their
Hmm.
product is so good that I don't care. But I don't know that that's sustainable, right? I don't know what happens when Jeff Bezos dies, right? Like, I don't like who knows. So that's the question. Uh,
Hmm.
I went off on a tangent of something that I probably don't know enough about and I shouldn't be talking about. But yeah, I don't think it's sustainable.
Um, have you always been humble? Do you even consider yourself humble? Because I'm presuming
I'm an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, I think. Uh, it depends on the day. Like my shit don't stink some days. Like, oh my God, I am the leadership coach of leadership coaches. And then some days I'm like, I should not even like be talking to anybody. So yeah, I think what I am is raw and honest. I do believe that there's an honesty to me, and a is a vulnerability. Um, I've just been through so much, and just have nothing to hide. That I think I think it comes off as humility. Uh, so I'm. It's not a question. It's not a question I ask myself. I try and show up as honest as I can possibly be.
Hmm. What about social media? What are your thoughts on that as far as the business, growing the business? Are you a fan of that
Hate
medium?
it.
Are
Hate it.
you
Hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it with a passion. Hate it even more than that. And if you look on all the channels, you will see my face in a video.
that'd
Uh,
be a good part too?
because
The
I'm also part ham. Because as much as I hate it, as much as I say I don't want to do it, I don't do what I don't do what I don't want to do, and I only do what I want to do. And with the number of videos of me on social media, I must like it. Right. I do like the feedback. Like I put out my newsletter today, I put out a video today, and I got a bunch of texts just saying this helped me, this was interesting. Like I live off of that, right? I'm an Enneagram 2, which is a personality type. I'm a helper, right? Like I
Hmm.
get my self esteem by how much value I bring to another person, right? It's that's a healthy and beautiful thing, and it's an unhealthy thing. But so when I get feedback that, oh, this was valuable, this was helpful to me, I'm good. Like that's great. So that's why I keep doing it, because I get the feedback and I make a difference.
This podcast's been all amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
You got to
That's
come back.
I live for this. See, like
You have to come back.
it was interesting because so since we're probably going over, but one of the things I realized was when I was struggling financially as a coach, it was because everybody in the world would say, Mark Silverman's amazing. You should talk to Mark. Mark is great. Mark will help you with that. And when someone would say that, I felt like I got paid. Like, oh, the world loves Mark Silverman. Mark Silverman is so valuable to the world. And I was struggling financially. When I found out I was an Enneagram 2 and that was the transaction I have with the world,
Hmm.
oh, I'm forgetting to get paid cash money. I doubled my income the minute I realized that someone complimenting me and telling me I'm useful doesn't pay the bills. Right. So
Wow.
now it's I am coin operated. You pay to talk to me. and uh and now I have the funds and I have the cash and everything, and I can help people who can't afford it, right? But I get paid first.
Hmm. One last question. You said you prepared. You looked some of the things that I had out there. What's one piece of critical feedback you can give for me? You think I should be doing more of? It could be,
I gave
while
it
I'm
I
on the
gave
clock. I want. I
I
want
gave it
to.
to you. I gave it to you at the beginning. Uh, I think I thought your bow tie, your vest, and your jacket with your long hair and the way you can, again,
Wow.
contrasting with your easy manner, right? And I love the two together. I felt like you when I saw those videos of you dressed like that, leading a talk. I felt like you were a person, an interesting person, a person of consequence. And so I think you adding that personal style into what you do, with the way you show up and the thoughtfulness that you put behind everything, is such a winning conversation, because part of this is getting your message heard, right? Your Instagram videos are so compelling and so interesting. Like what you have to say is substantive, thoughtful, and valuable. Unfortunately, we have to entertain a little. We have to have a special sauce that people care about us, right? Mel Robbins, by the way, I love Mel Robbins, have a huge crush on her, and like she's amazing. But Mel Robbins puts out the most Reader's Digest, like like pop psychology bullet point things, and she's blowing up. She's because she has a thing, she has a charisma, she has a style, she has a way of showing up that people can hear what she has to say. Right. So I unfortunately we have to add that to what we want to do. And I think you have a special sauce. I do think you have a pizzazz to you that you don't lean into. That's my
Mark, you're the man. Thanks for being honest. Thanks for crushing it. I'd be honored to have you back.
love it.
And if you're listening to this, follow Mark J. Silverman. Instagram, you find him easily. Thank you again, Dr. Yerkes, for making this happen. And please leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you again, my friend.
Thank you. This was great.